April 14th, 1988. The Persian Gulf. Captain Richard McKenna stood on the bridge of the USS Joseph Strauss, watching Iranian warships closing in through his binoculars. Naval engagement since World War II would be over, but at this moment, with Soviet ships nearby and tensions at a breaking point, McKenna had no way of knowing whether he was about to trigger the Third World War. The Pentagon called it Operation Praying Mantis. The Iranians called it an act of war. The Soviets called it dangerous provocation. What really happened that day in the Persian Gulf remained classified for years, a forgotten battle that brought the superpowers closer to direct conflict than most Americans ever realized. But the true story begins 4 days earlier, with an explosion that would change everything. By 1988, the Iran-Iraq War had been raging for nearly 8 years. What started as Saddam Hussein's attempt to seize Iranian oil fields had devolved into a brutal war of attrition. Chemical weapons, human wave attacks, nearly 1 million dead. And increasingly, the conflict was spilling beyond Iraq and Iran's borders. The Persian Gulf had become a maritime battlefield. Iranian speedboats harassed neutral tankers. Iraqi missiles struck civilian vessels. The world's oil supply, 40% of all seaborne petroleum, flowed through these contested waters. By 1987, Lloyd's of London had declared the Persian Gulf a war risk zone. President Reagan faced an impossible choice. America needed that oil. European allies demanded protection for their tankers. But direct military intervention risked war with Iran and potentially with the Soviet Union, which was increasingly vocal in supporting Tehran's colors. It was a policy that satisfied no one. Iranian Revolutionary Guards saw American ships as legitimate military targets. Pentagon planners worried about mission creep. Navy commanders found themselves playing a deadly game of cat and mouse with Iranian forces who knew these waters far better than they did. The rules of engagement were deliberately restrictive. American ships could defend themselves, but only when directly threatened. They could not pursue Iranian vessels into territorial waters. They could not preemptively strike Iranian bases, even when intelligence suggested imminent attacks. Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger later admitted the policy was designed to prevent escalation, but by early 1988, it was failing. The USS Samuel B. Roberts was not supposed to be there. The Perry-class frigate was conducting a routine patrol on April 14, 1988, when sonar operator Petty Officer Mark Cowett heard something that made his blood run cold. The distinctive acoustic signature of a contact mine hitting the ship's hull. The explosion tore a 15-foot hole in the Roberts' bottom. The blast lifted the 4,100-ton frigate 5 feet out of the water and broke her keel. In the engine room, Petty Officer Scott Lustig was thrown against a bulkhead with such force that he fractured his back. 5 other sailors suffered serious injuries. For 4 hours, the crew fought flooding and fires while sister ships stood by helplessly, unable to approach through what was clearly a newly laid minefield. But this was not a random accident. Intelligence analysts aboard the USS Coronado quickly determined that the mines were freshly laid, probably within the previous 48 hours. Worse, aerial reconnaissance had photographed the Iranian mine layer Iran Ajr in this exact location just 2 days earlier. The Roberts had struck an M08 mine, a Soviet-designed weapon that Iran was not supposed to possess. In Washington, the National Security Council convened an emergency session. CIA Director William Webster presented satellite photos showing Iranian Revolutionary Guard boats operating from the Siri and Sasan oil platforms that were supposedly civilian installations under international law. Defense Intelligence Agency briefers revealed months of intercepted communications, proving that Iran was coordinating attacks on neutral shipping from these platforms. President Reagan's decision was swift and unequivocal. He told National Security Advisor Colin Powell, "The Pentagon had been planning for this moment. Naval operation since the Vietnam War. The target list was ambitious. The Siri and Sasan platforms, the Iranian naval base at Bandar Abbas, and any Iranian warships that chose to fight. But there was a problem no one anticipated. Soviet Admiral Vladimir Chernavin had positioned a flotilla of Soviet warships less than 50 miles away. Moscow had been increasingly supportive of Iran since the USS Vincennes had accidentally shot down an Iranian civilian airliner 2 months earlier. Now, American battle groups were about to attack Iranian forces with Soviet vessels watching from close range. What happened next would test both countries' commitment to avoiding direct confrontation. At 0600 hours on April 18, 1988, the USS Missouri, the same battleship where Japan had surrendered in 1945, opened fire on the Siri oil platform with her massive 16-inch guns. The psychological effect was exactly what Pentagon planners had intended. These were the largest naval guns in the world, weapons that could hurl 2,700-pound shells 20 miles with pinpoint accuracy. The Iranian response was immediate and desperate. From Bandar Abbas, the Revolutionary Guard dispatched every available vessel, patrol boats, missile craft, and 2 frigates, the Sabalan and the Sahand. They were sailing toward overwhelming American firepower, and they knew it. Revolutionary Guard speedboats, each carrying only a few armed men, roared directly at American destroyers bristling with guided missiles and rapid-fire cannons. Radio intercepts revealed that Iranian commanders were ordering their boats to ram American ships if their weapons failed. The battle that followed was brutally one-sided. The Iranian frigate Sahand fired a single missile at American aircraft before disappearing in a massive explosion. USS Joseph Strauss and USS Bagley had hit her with multiple harpoon missiles simultaneously. Captain McKenna watched through binoculars as the Iranian ship, a modern vessel with 200 crew members, simply disintegrated. "There was nothing left but debris and oil slick," he reported to Fleet Command. The Sabalan met a similar fate. After launching missiles at the USS Wainwright, she was struck by laser-guided bombs from A-6 intruders. President Reagan had personally intervened. Watching the battle unfold in the White House Situation Room, he saw the Soviet flotilla moving closer to the engagement area. "We've made our point," he told Pentagon officials via secure video link. But the most dangerous moment was yet to come. At 1430 hours, radar operators aboard the USS Sides detected 4 Iranian F-4 Phantom jets approaching at high speed. These were not patrol boats or obsolete frigates. They were modern fighter bombers capable of sinking American ships with French-made Exocet missiles. The rules of engagement were clear. Any Iranian aircraft entering the engagement zone would be considered hostile and destroyed. Flight leader Major Hossein Lashkari was apparently unaware that a massive naval battle was raging below. Iranian radio communications, intercepted and later declassified, reveal that Lashkari believed he was conducting a routine patrol. When American fighters locked onto his formation with targeting radars, his final transmission was a confused request for clarification from base control. He never received an answer. All 4 Iranian jets were shot down in less than 90 seconds. By sunset on April 18th, Iran had lost half its operational navy. 2 frigates sunk or destroyed, 6 patrol boats eliminated, multiple aircraft downed. The oil platforms that had served as bases for attacks on neutral shipping were burning wrecks. American losses. 0 ships, 0 aircraft, 0 deaths. But something else had been lost that day, something that wouldn't be understood for years. The immediate aftermath of Operation Praying Mantis appeared to vindicate Reagan's strategy. Iranian attacks on neutral shipping dropped by 90% virtually overnight. The Iran-Iraq War, deprived of its maritime dimension, ground toward its conclusion. American naval supremacy in the Persian Gulf was unquestioned. But the human cost was becoming clear. The Iranian frigate Sahand had carried a crew of 200 sailors. Only 67 survivors were pulled from the water. The Sabalan lost 47 crew members before American pilots received orders to cease fire. Major Lashkari and his 3 wingmen left behind families who were never told why their aircraft had been in the engagement zone. In Tehran, Ayatollah Khomeini faced a strategic reality his advisors had tried to hide from him. Iran's navy was essentially destroyed. Her air force was suffering catastrophic losses. The 8-year war with Iraq had bankrupted the nation and cost over 500,000 Iranian lives. 3 months after Operation Praying Mantis, Iran accepted UN Resolution 598, ending the Iran-Iraq War. Captain McKenna was awarded the Bronze Star and promoted to Rear Admiral. The USS Samuel B. Roberts, the ship whose mining had triggered the entire operation, was repaired and returned to service. President Reagan's approval ratings reached their highest levels since the invasion of Grenada. But the Soviet response would have consequences no one anticipated. Admiral Chernavin's flotilla had observed the entire battle. Soviet intelligence officers carefully documented American tactics, weapons performance, and command procedures. This intelligence would later influence Soviet naval strategy in ways that Pentagon planners are still reluctant to discuss in detail. More immediately, Moscow dramatically increased military aid to Iran. Advanced surface-to-air missiles, electronic warfare equipment, and naval mines all flowed to Tehran in the months following Operation Praying Mantis. The missed opportunity was profound. In April 1988, Iran had been militarily defeated and potentially open to diplomatic engagement. Instead, Operation Praying Mantis drove Tehran deeper into Moscow's sphere of influence, a relationship that would complicate American foreign policy for decades. Today, the Persian Gulf remains one of the world's most contested waterways. Iranian speedboats still harass American warships. Revolutionary Guard forces still operate from fortified islands. The cycle of provocation and retaliation that began in 1987 continues 35 years later. Operation Praying Mantis achieved its tactical objectives completely. It failed in its strategic goals almost entirely. The operation demonstrated both the overwhelming power of American naval forces and the limitations of military solutions to political problems. 8 hours of combat eliminated Iran's navy, but guaranteed decades of enmity. Perhaps most troubling is how quickly this battle was forgotten. A naval engagement that involved over 25,000 American personnel, destroyed half of Iran's fleet, and nearly triggered superpower confrontation barely registers in popular memory of the Reagan years. The sailors who fought that day, American and Iranian, deserve better than historical amnesia. The Persian Gulf today is patrolled by the children and grandchildren of the men who fought at Siri Island in 1988. They face the same tactical challenges, the same strategic complexities, and the same impossible choice between American interests and regional stability. The Praying Mantis, after all, is a patient predator. It can wait decades for the right moment to strike,